Welcome to today's episode of Buildings Hub Live, where we spotlight the changemakers and technologies leading the charge to electrify our built environment. On our podcast, we tackle the issues facing building decarbonization, from space heating to electric cooking to building codes and beyond. On this episode, we'll chat with Allison MacMunn, Senior Program Director at Sunstone Strategies, and Zach Pierce, Head of Policy at Rewiring America. What were the biggest trends in building decarbonization in 2025? How did the new presidential administration change the direction of policy? And what does that mean for 2026? Stay tuned to find out. Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy Analyst, Stephen Naimoli.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 24th episode of Buildings Hub Live. I am your host, Stephen Naimoli. I'm a policy analyst here at Atlas. And today we're going to be discussing, looking back at sort of a busy 2025, making sense of what happened, and getting an idea of what we might expect for 2026. But before we jump into our discussion, I want to give a quick note on Buildings Hub. Here at Atlas, we manage a one-stop shop data analysis platform for building sector electrification called the Buildings Hub. If you're looking for heat pump market data, for state buildings, policies, and funding programs, the current makeup of the U.S. housing stock, and crisply designed dashboards, we've got you covered. We recently published a data story looking back at some of the trends and analysis from this past year that is relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. So we encourage you to come check out our platform, join the community, and see what we've got going on. As for this episode, we're currently live on YouTube and LinkedIn. We encourage you to send us your questions through the Q&A portal on YouTube, and we will incorporate them throughout the broadcast. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our special guests today. We are joined by Allison MacMunn, Senior Program Director at Sunstone Strategies, and Zach Pierce, Head of Policy at Rewiring America. Allison and Zach, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Let's jump in. I want to start off by just having each one of you just share a little bit about your organization and your role. Allison, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thank you again. But yeah, Sunstone Strategies, we're a communications consulting firm. We're really focused on climate change policy. And I'm a senior program director, and my work is primarily focused on campaigns that are advancing like healthy climate resilient buildings and the gas transition. Our firm was actually born with a campaign on Berkeley's landmark gas ordinance. So our buildings and gas work is very much in the core DNA of Sunstone.
Great, thank you. Zach, what about you?
Thanks, Stephen. We'll just start by expressing my appreciation to you and the team at Atlas for convening today's discussion and just for all of the incredible resources that Atlas provides to the space. I know that our team at Rewiring leans on them heavily. So as Stephen mentioned, my name is Zach Pierce. I'm the head of policy at Rewiring America. We're a national electrification nonprofit dedicated to forging the path to limitless clean energy for every American. And we're doing a lot of work across our country in service of our North Star, which is to ensure that efficient electric machines are the cheapest and most convenient to install and operate for everyone. We're really excited about positioning these household upgrades, these electrification investments as readily available, no regrets pathways to alleviating cost burdens for families, while also meeting our energy planners' needs for affordability, reliability, and economic development. And we're pursuing this work in a few ways across the country. We develop tools and educational resources for folks to help them kind of along their own personal electrification journey. We're working on retrofit projects, so we're in communities across the country working with local partners to help actually electrify neighborhoods and communities. And then the hat that I wear and bring today's discussion is our policy work. So we're engaged at the federal level and states across the country trying to pass ambitious regulations and laws and other policies that are going to help spark the market transformation for these efficient electric machines, both in an aims to benefit families and also strengthen our grid.
Great, thank you. I want to just highlight quickly, you mentioned, Zach, affordable, and convenient. I think that is a really big theme that we're going to be touching on today. So I want to kind of put a pin in that and come back to that. Diving in, really, probably the most high-profile changes that we saw last year really came from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in Congress, which made changes to the tax code. It eliminated tax credits. It pulled back funding for a lot of programs, including Solar for All, and it really kind of set a different direction for federal policy. I want to talk a little bit about what was your perspective on these changes on the bill at the time, and then has that changed in the intervening months since the dust has settled? Zach, why don't we start with you?
Great, thanks for the question. So yeah, the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which I'll just refer to as OBBB, feels like a long time ago, but obviously many salient issues that we're still grappling with today. Rewiring America was very engaged in the enactment of the Inflation Reduction Act, and we're very involved with the negotiations around the OBBB. So this is an issue that's definitely near and dear to our hearts. And at the time, our view is that the OBBB was a major step backward for affordability and reliability because it weakened many of the policies that are going to lower household bills and reduce system costs. We were very focused, both in the IRA and the OBBB, on some of the consumer-facing tax credits and rebates. And our view is that many of these investments have helped millions of families and households across the country reduce their energy bills, improve the comfort and safety of their homes by upgrading to modern, efficient appliances and vehicles. And we really saw that preemptively phasing out these credits, many of which were enacted under a Republican-led Congress and previously extended under the previous Trump administration, really takes away affordable home upgrade options for families in the middle of an energy affordability crisis, which I know we'll talk more about. Not to mention upgrades that could also relieve pressure on the grid, which we know is facing many challenges right now. I'll also just quickly touch on the fact that the impact of the OBBB since it was enacted has really been compounded by subsequent federal action. So we've seen tens of billions of dollars of grant and loan awards for grid modernization, either frozen or canceled. The home energy rebates program, which I think folks may know in this space, is a really important investment. Many of those programs have been stuck in limbo. No new state programs have been approved for launch since this administration was inaugurated, which leaves over $6 billion in appropriated funding on the table while energy prices continue to rise. And these are, funds that we're talking about bread and butter upgrades to folks' homes to do all the things that I've previously mentioned: reduce bills, make their homes safer, more affordable, and relieve pressure on our grid. So I think that the net effect of these actions has been to exacerbate the affordability crisis, raise the stakes for states and cities and residents to kind of step in or deal with the impacts. But I think it also speaks to the value of future action and the importance of continuing to fight for many of these common sense investments, irrespective of what happens with federal budget negotiations.
Thanks, Zach. Allison, what's your perspective from Sunstone's side?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Zach. And I think I might steal the BBB from you. I like that. But yeah, I think the impact of that bill will be known for like decades to come, just in terms of higher energy bills. And that's after Trump campaigned on a promise to cut energy bills in half within his first, I think, 12 or 18 months in office. But unfortunately, this is just not what we're seeing playing out. And, I feel like we're seeing across the board, it's not just the rollback of a lot of the incentives and tax credits within the bill. These are weatherization credits that people really valued, like enjoyed bipartisan support for decades. And then we're seeing additional attacks on energy efficiency standards. Some standards are now just gone. There's no efficiency standards for some appliances. And even attacks on Energy Star and LIHEAP, that like critical federal safety net provided by LIHEAP. So I think what we know from polling is that people really value and inherently understand the value of energy efficiency. So I find this sort of like war on efficiency led by the GOP really baffling. And again, like these are measures that people have long supported. Ultimately, utilities should be a public good, not a luxury item, but bills are on the rise. Utilities are getting these record profits for their shareholders. And again, like home heating is really, and cooling and extreme heat are both necessities, right? It's about safety. So I think the good news is that we do have some solutions in front of us. We have the tools that we need today to be able to secure lasting affordability through highly efficient homes and buildings and through bringing more affordable, abundant, clean energy online. So I think to your original question, like, yes, the dust as it begins to settle, I've just seen more states, like within this like huge federal like rollback and this vacuum created, more states are really stepping up, whether it's looking at greater regulatory actions against utilities who are maybe should be putting people first, or finding ways to really advance these buildings aligned policies to deliver the energy bill relief that's just really, really needed right now.
Relatedly, Allison, I'm curious because you mentioned that a lot of your work has to do with campaigns and focusing on that kind of messaging. So what are some of the messages that building decarbonization groups that you've worked with were really interested in moving forward with last year?
Yeah, I think you're right in that the one thing on people's mind has been this year. We've seen it through even some of the elections recently, but it's like really just about affordability. And I think a lot of our advocates are just like, wow, like how do you advance clean energy policy amid an affordability crisis and all the rollback of all of these hard-won incentives that we had secured through the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think, ultimately, I think folks are just trying to hone in on messaging, recognizing that our opposition is very well funded. But at the end of the day, the cost of methane is really wildly volatile and has been driven upwards by not only LNG exports, but also like the cold winter weather. It's not good for gas bills, but it's also not good for electricity bills because electricity is often generated by gas plants. So we're seeing as a result of this, energy bills are really the leading drivers of inflation right now. And gas bills are increasing 4 times the rate of inflation. So I think that people are really seeking to help just the public understand their utility bills and place blame where it belongs, and then also looking for solutions. So I think that they want to do this in a way that makes it really clear that unfortunately utility profits are largely what driving those investment decisions rather than what's in the best interest of the customers, because ultimately we're paying more for less, at least when it comes to our gas bills, because utilities make the most profits from the construction projects and gas pipelines and building gas plants. They don't make as much from actually selling the fuel itself. So I think we're seeing a lot of space where this conversation is happening, and we're just hoping to equip advocates with the tools that they need to really convey that to people and help them like connect the dots between the high bills, what's in these hidden delivery charges, and then what's happening at like rate cases, for instance.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've certainly seen a lot this year is an emphasis on, how little, I suppose, of the charges that you pay on your bills are driven by how much you're using, and how much of it is, and how much of these bill increases are based on, new construction and new investments in infrastructure. So that they're really highlighting the importance of, or the outsized role, I suppose, of infrastructure and infrastructure spending. I want to touch on another thing that you mentioned, Allison. You talked about, states stepping up to kind of fill the void left by the federal government sort of pulling back. Where have you seen that this year? I think I'll give you a break, Allison. Maybe I'll start with Zach this time.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. So when it comes to state activity in this space, I think it's a complicated picture. On one hand, we do need to acknowledge the very real challenges that states are grappling with from the Trump administration, whether that's through executive orders or other actions that are challenging state authority, state jurisdiction over some of these issues, and frankly, broader challenges to civic society and that's engaged in those states. At the same time, I think we're seeing some exciting activity. I mean, we're seeing a number of diverse states across the country take very notable and important strides forward, because not only do they know that they need to really step into the void of climate leadership, but also that these solutions do offer the pathway to improved affordability and well-being for communities. And when I say these solutions, I mean things like electrification in buildings, more efficient heat pumps, weatherization, rooftop solar, storage, electric vehicles, kind of the whole electric tech stack. And we're seeing a lot of exciting examples across the country. I won't get into all of those, but just a few examples. I do think we're seeing states who are really stepping up to backfill the federal rollback in funding. So, just one example that comes to mind for me, because it's recent and notable, is the recent steps in New York taken to really invest in the Empower Plus program. That's making many of these investments. There's other programs like the Equitable Building Decarb program in California, a direct install program. Those are just two examples, but I do think there are states across the country that know that they really need to take these investments into their own hands, and that the return on investment is certainly a compelling one. We're seeing states get into the wonkiness of really working to modernize and innovate on how we charge for electricity through rate design. So, there's been, I think, a real proliferation in new seasonal rates, time of use rates that more accurately value the benefits of home electrification, efficiency, load shifting, and as a result are putting downward pressure on costs for customers, but also helping to send the right price signals to utilize the system more efficiently, which is a double benefit. We're seeing, and that's happening, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Colorado, there's lots of different permutations of this, but this is not a one-off area of activity. We're seeing states not just think about incentives, but thinking about how government and policy can be used to reduce soft costs in the market for things like solar and storage or new appliances. So this gets into permitting reform, interconnection reform. I think Texas last year passed legislation that moved forward approval and authority for third-party permitting and remote permitting. I know that California this year is considering legislation that would streamline the process for heat pump permitting. So we need to make sure that we are incentivizing this market, but that we're also working on the structural reforms that are going to help the market do its own work for, in a lasting manner. And then I'll just quickly end on one final example that Allison, you and Stephen have already raised, which is we are seeing many states take a more critical eye towards investments in the gas system and making sure that we're not that we are minimizing sunk costs into a system that is increasingly aging and outdated. So you're seeing this in the form of more proactive, future-proofed energy planning, these big future of gas proceedings, or looking at more integrated planning between the gas system and the electric system, like we're seeing in Washington State. Colorado's doing this, Massachusetts doing this. And then we're also seeing states really take decisive action in eliminating subsidies for the expansion of the gas system that may no longer make sense. So this, the big focal point here is eliminating these line extension allowances, where the kind of status quo policy is that folks who are on the existing gas system are subsidizing expansion of their system when a new development comes in or whatnot. And I think, there's a lot of different aspects to this, but the bottom line is, in the midst of an energy affordability crisis, we do not have the luxury of investing in what is redundant energy infrastructure. And we know that, paying for gas and electric infrastructure into a new home drives up the cost. And as we look at the tens of billions of dollars that we're investing in the gas system every year, compared to the proliferation and growth of electricity really serving many of those end uses in the home, I think we're seeing a lot of states look towards that mismatch as a really big opportunity to protect consumers, to right size our investments, and to make sure that our energy planning is fit to meet the needs of the 21st century.
Thank you. There's a lot to react to, but I want to give Allison a chance to chime in before I speak.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think we are seeing many of the same things where states are really stepping up. I think it's like with even like scaled solutions like thermal energy networks. We're seeing 1 in 4 states have now passed legislation related to these, whether it's like a study or pilots. So it's like clearly there's a need, and especially some of these solutions that can help provide energy bill relief. And then totally agree on the heat pump specific rate. I think it's really important that we make sure customers aren't overcharged from heat pumps. And we know that, again, like just like Zach said, like it can place like widespread heat pump adoption. All these analyses show that it can place a downward pressure on electricity rates. So it's not just the household that benefits from a heat pump and lower costs, but like everyone can benefit. There's just so many great benefits for everyone, and it would be silly not to make these investments. I also want to note that states like Maryland and Illinois have been really reining in utility spending on pipelines. And then even like states like Oregon, New York, and California have begun really ordering utilities to stop charging customers for their lobbying and their marketing campaigns. Again, it's just like we're seeing this where it's like costs are being called out and cut where they should be, and hopefully investments will be made towards bringing more affordable clean energy online and modernizing our homes.
Thanks to both of you for that. That was really useful and interesting. I think just a couple of things I want to note before we move on. The thermal energy networks piece is something that we also highlighted in the data story I mentioned earlier. We picked up on that as sort of one of the things that is really like interesting that was coming up a lot last year. I also personally have been very interested in the rate design, the alternative rate design kind of thing and seeing what states and cities are coming up with in trying to particularly recognize the values of heat pumps to these greater systems that are not currently getting captured by the costs and the rates and all that kind of stuff. I want to keep moving because we don't have a ton of time left. I'm curious, what surprised you in buildings, in the buildings world in 2025? Allison, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think Zach touched upon this, but I think I'm surprised by how many states have quickly begun to end line extension allowances. I think that, after there was a cold event in Massachusetts last year, a lot of people were turning their attention to the costs associated with energy efficiency programs. But like those are the programs that are actually going to help people lower energy bills and push towards these solutions. Whereas like costs associated with like line extension allowances and other subsidies are really more of a problem. So I think we see totaling now 12 states and DC are moving to end line extension allowances. New York recently passed that 100-foot rule. And again, like line extension allowances are just this outdated rule that allow gas utilities to profit by charging existing customers for the cost of adding new customers to the gas system. And when you explain it to people like that, like we did a message testing project, people were very opposed to this. So for me, it is like very much a winning issue for us. Like we should not be paying for this. And I believe one analysis found it was like $7 billion every year could be saved by ending line extension allowances across the country. So I'm hoping this is going to be the beginning and not the end of this conversation when it comes to subsidies. I think we should be continuing to address that.
Great, thanks. Zach, what about you?
Yeah, well, 2025 did not have its lack of surprises, but one of the things that surprised me was just how quickly and extensively energy affordability became the center of the conversation. And I, of course, don't mean this in a way to downplay the very real challenges and impacts for folks who are actually experiencing high energy burden and the impact of high energy prices. But across the country, facing a variety of competing and fundamental challenges in this moment, whether you're talking about broader affordability concerns, housing, healthcare. I won't go through a whole list, but I really was surprised to see not just energy affordability, but electricity prices and electricity affordability emerge as the issue in a number of elections last fall in places like Georgia, New Jersey, Virginia, but also for policymakers at the federal level and in states across the country over the course of the year. And of course, this dynamic's not going away. It's clear that energy affordability is really going to be a litmus test for not just PUC commissioners and utility executive, but governors, other elected officials, and of course, everyone in our advocacy community who's working on building decarbonization. So we, at Rewiring America, certainly all that we do now really is viewed through the prism of energy affordability. And we need to make sure that we are stress testing our own theories about how to advance not just the decarbonization transition and the longer term transition of our energy system, but bottom line kitchen table affordability issues for households. And I think we have the benefit of having many of those technologies that can meet the moment and actually serve folks in a way that's going to put downward pressure on system costs and reduce their bills. So I think the work is going out into the world and actually showing that can be a reality for folks in diverse communities across the country.
Yeah, I imagine that we're going to see a lot more on affordability, and that's going to continue to be a really salient issue. Kind of looking in the other direction, though, what do you think? What trends for 2025 do you think are going to change in 2026? Allison, why don't you start?
Yeah. So I am going to predict, I kind of feel like efficient electric buildings are about to become the norm. And I think people realize and fully recognize the value of efficient electric homes, because it can mean state-of-the-art electric equipment, like modern equipment, as well as building to that higher quality standard. Like, no one wants to build your dream home to be drafty, and greater efficiency, both with those two elements, can really dramatically lower energy costs and also offer greater protection from extreme weather events, even during like emergency power outages. So I think that we're going to see two things that we're really going to fuel this trend. The first is that I think, building electric is actually not only cheaper, but it's also faster than building with both electric and gas. And because it's cheaper and faster, I think it's going to become a solution for not only the energy bill crisis, but the affordable housing crisis to a certain extent. And the second thing I'd point to is that, the kitchen is no longer going to be a sticking point for electric homes. And that's because induction cooking is really a technology that's on a rise, is popular with chefs and designers and home cooks because it's faster to cook with, more precise, easier to clean. House Digest named it the kitchen design trend of 2026. And we're seeing 2 out of every 3 kitchen designers attest that within the next few years, it's going to be the most popular way to cook. So I think, due to the growing popularity of induction and also just the reality of construction costs, people are going to start choosing to build electric. I think we're going to see a clear market shift towards that in the coming year.
Great. I love to hear your predictions. Zach, what about you?
Okay, I'm eyeing the clock, so I'm going to try to be brief, which isn't always my strong suit. But I'm going to touch on 2 topics. I think that 2026 we're going to see a real growing acknowledgement of and alarm about the runaway gas spending in the midst of an affordability crisis. I mean, there's so much focus right now on the costs on the electric side of our system, capacity prices in the PJM market, all of these things on the electric side. Meanwhile, we are, really pursuing a status quo investment paradigm in another really significant piece of energy infrastructure, which is our gas system. Tens of billions of dollars every year going just to replace pipes that are aging. And so this is no longer a hypothetical concern for us to figure out in the future. We are seeing the very real impact of not just volatile fossil fuel prices, but also the delivery costs and the cost of the fixed infrastructure that people are paying for every month. And electricity prices are increasing, outpacing inflation, but we also know in many places in this country, gas prices are increasing twice as fast as electricity prices. So I do think the sound around this emerging consumer protection risk is going to get louder. And the other thing quickly is I'm amazed we haven't said the word data centers yet in this conversation, but obviously that was another wave of last year of data centers really coming into the center of the conversation. And there's all sorts of aspects of this conversation, but one of the things that we've really focused on as an organization is what investments can data centers make, not in on-site capacity or utility scale resources, but how can they invest in communities in a way that's going to help with their social license to operate, but also bolster the grid. And so quickly, we looked at how much capacity you could generate by just converting every household, single family household in this country that's currently using very inefficient electric resistance heating, which is basically toaster technology. If you upgraded all of those homes to efficient heat pumps, we found that you could meet about a third of the projected data center demand across this country by 2030. And if you add solar and storage, you can well exceed the capacity that we're projecting from data centers and all of the associated concerns about costs, et cetera. And that's not to say that these are the only solutions out there, or that that's all we have to do, or that there won't be costs associated with those upgrades. But we are very excited about making sure that we do not ignore this tool in the toolbox to make investments in households that are going to help protect them from rising electricity prices today, while also making sure that they have a role to play in our shared energy infrastructure for decades to come. So my prediction is that we're going to see some exciting movement in these bring your own capacity arrangements or interconnection agreements, whereby a data center helps to invest in those upgrades as part of their negotiation with the utility. And it's a win-win in many ways.
Well, you both got bold predictions, and I like that. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're just about out of time, but really appreciate you both. It's been a great discussion, and it's been great to have you here.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thanks to our audience so much. You'll find a recording of this episode and any of our past episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you go, and on YouTube as well. And check out the Buildings Hub, read our digests, our data stories, join our community, and we'd love to have you. And we'll see you soon for another Buildings Hub Live.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Buildings Hub Live. You can listen to this episode and all other installments in our podcast on the Atlas YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you're interested in additional content, check out our data, articles, and dashboards on Buildings Hub at atlasbuildingshub.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you again soon.